Why would somebody use humiliation against their partner?
It doesn't leave a bruise. It doesn't leave a mark. It doesn't show unless the person who's enduring the violence is willing to show it.
If you scroll through any social media platform, you will see countless videos of people pranking their partner, families, and friends. Some of these videos even go viral, getting millions of views. Then the comment section is usually filled with people saying how funny these videos are and mentioning how maybe they're going to try this with their partner, child, or friend. But what does it mean when only one party is laughing in these videos? Could some of these pranks have a harmful effect on people, particularly on those experiencing domestic violence? And if so, when is it just a joke and when can it be abusive? This is Unsilenced, a JBWS podcast where we have real conversations about abuse. I'm MC Robinson, and today we're speaking with
Fiorella Diaz. I am the Director of Residential Services and Supportive Services for JBWS. So I take care of all of the people that are looking for housing needs.
Fiorella is going to share her insights, expertise, and experiences surrounding the difference between jokes and abusive behavior. So, we've talked about this before, wanting to really go into the difference between when things are a joke and when they can come across as abusive. So, basically, with the popularity of TikTok, there seems to be this huge increase in the number of viral videos that people are making where they're pranking their partner or their children and they're filming them basically intended to be funny. But what are some issues surrounding this? And like, how could this be particularly problematic for a person that's maybe in an abusive relationship?
I think the issue about it is the virality of the content and how easy somebody's life can change or career can change or their image can change in a matter of seconds. Because one thing that was supposed to be perhaps an inside joke or something that is not supposed to make that much of an impact has hurt, triggered, or affected a lot of people. I mean, I grew up during the time of, punked, right? When I'm that old, I remember
Me
I
too.
remember those times where we thought it was funny to prank people and celebrities getting, cars stolen or, their jewelry stolen and we're like, "Oh my God, this is such an inside thing." But these are celebrities who sign NDAs who eventually sign off on these things so that it can be publicized. If my husband does the same thing to me and I don't want it to be shared, my job, my life, my image, my license can all be affected by something that I wasn't a part of. It wasn't my choice. And
Mhm.
that's what it's really about. It's about the choice in being part of something that goes viral.
Hmm. Do you think humiliation also plays into this dynamic a little bit? How so?
Absolutely. Humiliation, I think, has become the social need of 2024. They identify with people who are being humiliated, or they feel like they need to save the person who's being humiliated, or they need to justify the humiliation.
Mhm.
So if it's someone who's like, oh, it's just a prank, just let it go, or oh, it's just this. Whereas it's not. It's humiliation has become really mean.
And what,
Just
like,
mean.
how would somebody that's maybe using abuse use humiliation in the context of an abusive relationship? Like, how would they use that for gaining power and control or something like that?
The abuse that happens between two people or the violence that happens between two people, even the person who's enduring the violence is something that they want to keep private until they are ready to get out of it. Much like someone who is ready to come out, right? It's not up to anybody else to bring that out except themselves. So when someone posts a prank or some kind of abuse or some kind of outing of their violence or their miscommunication that happens in social media. The person who's enduring the violence or the humiliation is not ready for that yet, not ready for the conversations, is not ready for the repercussions. They're not ready for the justifications like, oh, well, that's just who he is. They're not ready for all of that just yet. And so what we're doing is that we're creating another burden for the person who's enduring the violence to justify how they're feeling and they might not even be ready for it.
I also think that's interesting. I studied kind of the internet and how the public, massively public nature of it can be so damaging in a lot of regards. So if you have somebody, there's different types of abuse, obviously, and one of them is this way of humiliating your partner, in front of friends or family. And so when you're pranking someone on the internet, all of a sudden you're upping that humiliation from like five people
Mhm.
to 500,000 people or millions. Do you think some of that feeds into almost a sense of invalidation? Because then you'll have people in the comments like, oh my gosh, this is so funny, like
Right.
hilarious.
Or they're saying, well, he's so genderizing, and I apologize. Well, she's so beautiful. I mean, you're so lucky. Look at the house that you're living in. We get a glimpse of these superficial things that are going viral that justify the humiliation that the person might be enduring. Like, you really are he's putting you in a really nice house. Like, she cooks every single meal for you. Are you really that abused?
Why would somebody use humiliation against their partner? How would it benefit the person that's using abuse, like to keep them maybe under their control or something? What is it about humiliation that could have like a powerful effect in keeping someone in the relationship?
It doesn't leave a bruise. It doesn't leave a mark. It doesn't show unless the person who's enduring the violence is willing to show it. And by that I mean we have functional depression, functional anxiety, functional alcoholism, all of these functionalities that we have conditioned ourselves to live in, and humiliation doesn't leave a scar.
Which makes it harder to maybe identify,
Yeah, of
especially when the larger public is saying how funny it is or how
course.
whatever. I mean, that's really interesting. So, would you say that potentially these kind of jokes and pranks, for instance, I think we talked in the past about like girls would go to sleep and wake up with their hair cut off. Do you think that's a type of emotional abuse, or where do you think that would fall in?
It's like they genuinely don't like the person, and so the only thing that I can do is damage them in the most apparent way. When they take it to the point where they're cutting somebody's hair or shaving somebody's eyebrow or cracking an egg on their forehead, it's it's something that they can only do to take away an image
Mhm.
of a person. And I mean, talk about ultimate power at that point.
That's a really interesting point. And actually, I was going to ask you about this. A while ago, there was that egg cracking challenge where parents or whoever would have an egg and just smash it on their kid's head a
Yeah.
lot of the time. And I think this is a really interesting conversation about the nature of abuse because a lot of times we think about it in terms of like romantic partners, but abuse can also happen between parents and children, children and parents,
So
different kinds of dynamic. So regarding that egg prank, what is it about it that's wrong? Why do you feel like that crosses a line?
I think that that crosses a line because one, we're not taking into account the age of the child and then their consent. Like, I think it all boils down to consent, really. It all boils down to, if I have 7-year-old twins, if by the time they get to college or they start dating or they start applying for things and I go viral for cracking an egg on their forehead, like,
Mhm.
what does that say about them, and why didn't they have a choice at 7 when I decided to be, TikTok mom or something? I just don't get it. I don't understand the want to have those kinds of engagements when we could use social media for something so much better. We have such a unique opportunity in this world to bring awareness and kindness and hope, and use social media in a way that can help people instead of humiliating them, including our children.
Yeah, it almost
Yeah.
feels like now there's a greater avenue for using these kind of
Yeah.
abusive behaviors. And I also feel like there's a little bit of minimizing of it. For instance, the kids in those kind of pranks, it would be like, you crack the egg, they start crying, and the parents are losing their mind laughing.
Right.
Or,
Right.
in other pranks that you see online, the people are responding negatively to that. And then their partners, parents, whoever are basically like, well, it's just a joke.
It's just a joke.
Yeah. And
It's
like, do
just an
you
egg. It wasn't a brick.
And do you think that like takes away their power by minimizing the experience of the abuse that they're going through or the discomfort if you don't want to escalate it to the point of abuse?
I don't think the kids are capable of realizing that just yet. I think that when they look back on it, they will, but I think that it increases the power of the person who's posting it.
Hmm.
I mean, if I get 5 million views and get TikTok to give me money for humiliating my child, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I personally would never do it. I personally would never do it. But I mean, there are some things that we do as parents that there's just no need to put our children in those positions. There's no need to put our partners in those positions. There's no need to put ourselves in those positions. Because I mean, I don't know if you've seen this. I meant to send this to you, MC. The couple that was at the wedding, and she specifically said, I just got my makeup done. Don't put cake on my face. I don't want
Yes.
cake on my face. Feed each other nicely. And
Hmm.
then he grabbed the cake and like smeared it all over her face.
Hmm.
And then they went viral. And
Hmm.
so she had to now defend the fact that her wedding day and her day that she planned for, because he didn't do any of it, became this whole thing that she had to provide an explanation for. Fun fact, when I got married, my husband smashed the cake in my face, like full on. And it wasn't publicized. It wasn't all over social media. And it was something that I was part of the conversation. I was
Right.
part of the joke. For
Mhm.
me, the makeup wasn't so important. For me, it was about us enjoying in that playful
Mhm.
banter that we both had. But if someone specifically tells you no,
Mhm.
don't do this on my day, and you do it and then you post it and you think it's funny,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean
that's
that's
just
really
makes no sense.
it doesn't, and it's really interesting. I think you keep coming back to the point of consent and making sure that both parties are equally in on the joke
Yeah,
because otherwise it is just a demonstration of power. And I do find it interesting that somebody would think it's funny to overtly go against their partner's wishes after they had agreed upon that they were not going to do that.
right.
And I remember you did actually send that to me, and I think the discourse there is really interesting because once again, there's a lot of minimizing. Oh my gosh, it's just cake. Like, who cares? Like, why does it matter? And I'm just curious in general, how does that concept of minimizing, how do people who use abuse use that again in their maybe ability to control somebody? How is minimizing used in abusive dynamics?
It's their ammo. It's their ammo. So their weapon of choice is humiliation, and minimizing is their ammo because they have justification for continuing the humiliation because there is no real repercussions or consequences for these people.
Hmm.
So they're going viral, they're seeing the comments, they're seeing that they're mostly positive because oh that's so funny, oh this is amazing.
Hmm.
And they'll keep doing it and doing it again. And so we society keep reloading that weapon so
Hmm.
that they can continue the humiliation, and they keep firing it away and firing it away and firing it away.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting to me because a lot of people I feel cover that up with like, "Oh, I'm just kidding." And I think that's a convenient way to get out of it. But also, every like on those videos and like every share is almost a subtle endorsement that the
Of
behavior
course.
isn't wrong. But I think something that bothers people is that then they feel like bad people, that they think it's funny or that they didn't acknowledge it. So I feel like it's also important to note that they're not bad people. Society has conditioned us to think these kind of jokes and pranks are
Mhm.
funny, but what's something that like you wish they knew about it? To the people that think who view that and think it's funny.
That it's funny as for them, but it also can be hurtful for others. So the experience of watching the cake smashing video for me was very, very different for the person who was feeling it on her wedding day. Like DV violence in general is very different. It's felt differently by every single person. So you are absolutely allowed to look at a video and say, "Oh wow, this is really funny. This is two people who obviously love each other and they're joking and they're laughing about it." But if you see like a comment, two comments of someone being physically or emotionally affected, validate that
Hmm.
because that's their perspective and that's their feelings about something. And there must be a reason why. And if it's more than two people
Hmm.
saying something in those comment sections, then perhaps the whole of the society needs to really refocus on how we see things,
Yeah.
because
I mean,
that's the thing.
it's really interesting because something I grew up with was that mean jokes were funny. Like that was
Oh
something
yeah.
that I was kind of like I would see around me in my environment. And I remember being in a relationship with somebody and they had said to me, like, mean jokes aren't funny. I was 19 or 20. And I remember thinking, that had never occurred to me. And I felt so stupid. But if you don't reflect on it, you might not recognize the harm
Right.
that you're participating in. And people feel very called out if they find these things funny. And they're like, well, I would never endorse abuse. So I couldn't, this isn't abusive. It's like a defensive type thing. A lot of us have accidentally participated in problematic societal norms. And I think it's okay to like reflect on that. And
Yeah.
it really, as we were discussing this topic, it really reminds me of that comedian Matt Rife. I don't know if you remember, but last year he
Yes.
made these comments about a woman who was clearly experiencing physical violence.
Mhm.
And that sparked this massive debate about what is a joke or can jokes be harmful in and of itself,
Mhm.
even outside of an abusive relationship, like about these topics, and
Mhm.
some people saw an issue with the joke and other people didn't. But what would you say to somebody who's listening that has that mindset of you're just being too sensitive. You don't have a sense of humor. These people are comedians. These are jokes. What do you, what would you say to them to correct that opinion?
That two things can exist in the exact same universe. That someone is so desensitized and so unaware or just not privy to what DV means, and they say something like Matt Rife did. For him, it must have been funny. For him, it must have, segued into another joke, and he had his whole lineup. Like I get where that exists in that universe, and where people are existing where they feel affected and hurt and um misunderstood because they laughed at every other joke that he did. And
Mhm.
so, wait, so this one joke is going to take away from my admiration of this person that I thought was really, really funny? Two things can exist at the same time. We can like someone, um, especially in the field that I'm in, is that you can be in love with someone who
Mhm.
hurts you. They can be the partner, father, mother of your child,
Mhm.
and they could still hurt you or your child. So those two things can exist, and it's all about how we reflect on it and deal with it and
Mhm.
process it. And that's why counseling is so important. That's why case management is so important. That's why self-reflection is so important. Be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself, be aware of the things that are happening around you, and just process them in real time.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about how difficult it is for a person to leave their partner when they are experiencing abuse? Because I also think it could have some sort of negative impact on a person experiencing domestic abuse to hear the minimization and to
Yeah.
hear, oh, it is funny to make jokes about domestic violence or it is
Right.
funny to prank my partner in this way. So, can you talk a little bit about how hard that is to leave and then those messages that could complicate their process?
When society is minimizing that they live in such a wealthy area with the kids in the best schools and they're driving the newest car, and you get to go to the gym every day, and you get to have a personal chef and all of these things, or you know you're you don't have to work, you live in a low income facility but you are fine and your kids are healthy, and all of these things, the minimization of all of the things that are happening. They would rather stay with the person that they know the abuse from
Hmm.
than going out into society because they don't know what they're going to face.
Hmm.
So when we receive people leaving or fleeing domestic violence, there's no cookie cutter way of how we receive them because they come in different phases of their trauma.
Isn't the statistic like the average person leaves their partner about 7 times before they
Yeah,
actually leave? So you don't want things
I
to,
would go back to my partner.
yeah.
I mean, if we want to talk candidly, if there was ever an instance, God, forbid, where I had to leave or flee, I would be in a vulnerable position because I don't have the tools or capacity. It's a hard decision to make, especially when there's children involved or there's financial manipulation involved and all of the other things that are happening. I would be I would be hard to leave. And this is someone who's works for in the TV field for a really long time. It's a
Yeah.
hard decision.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to keep in mind when we're talking about the way we talk about domestic violence in general, because you never know who might be listening that's experiencing it and the subtle
Yeah.
messaging that you're getting across to them, even without intending it, which is the
Hmm.
intention of, this podcast and talking about this stuff. But, there's something to be said about jokes in general, right? Like,
Hmm.
obviously, we're not anti-fun. I feel like we're funny people, right?
Yes, I think so.
If you can't tell. No, but like you talked about this a little bit more or a little bit earlier, but could you tell me a way that like you could prank someone that isn't harmful in a way that is mutually funny and you both can laugh? Because we're not saying like all pranks are bad and no laughing is allowed, you
Hmm.
know?
Again, it's all about consent. There's this person who's, I think, theatrical. She's like in Broadway or something, and she wakes up her partner in different garbs and stuff. Like she just did the Backstreet Boys, and then she didn't sing. And I thought that was the most hilarious thing. But she's waking him up in a very vulnerable state. He's sleeping.
Hmm.
And they are very vocal about the fact that they talk about the content they're going to do. He doesn't know when that's going to happen,
Right.
but he knows that it's going to happen.
Hmm.
So it's all about communication. If any relationship, forget social media, forget TikTok, forget Instagram reels and all that stuff. If you just have complete communication, honest and true communication about how you're going into this relationship and how you're going to come out of it, then all of this will be consensual.
Hmm.
All of the funny ha-has will be consensual.
Hmm.
The cake smashing in my face during my wedding was consensual.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
we can laugh. Let's laugh.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that is the perfect delineation is that are you laughing together or is one
Right.
party laughing at you? And
Yeah.
how do you really and there's no, as you said, no cookie cutter thing. Because what I might find hilarious and funny, like I actually tend to like when people make fun of me. I think it's so funny. My brother roasts me and I'm like, do it. But other people who maybe don't have that would
Right.
would be really damaged by that. And I think the ability to have that nuance is really important because yeah, maybe him doing that is fine because I've told him it's funny. I like
Yeah.
it. But somebody else, if you said, please don't do that, and they keep doing it, that's where the problem rests. And I
Right.
think that's why it's so difficult. So would you say that some of the core tenets of kind of non-harmful jokes would be honesty, communication, anything else?
Consent, reflection. Like, I mean, no one's perfect. No one is going to make the perfect viral video. But if there is a consensus that, for example, the egg cracking thing, like if there's a consensus, a societal move that saw that it wasn't funny,
Hmm.
and you see that the first 10 videos, although successful, had very negative comments or very bad reflections,
Hmm.
maybe don't film your child and do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, really be conscious about the fact that you're going into this partnership, relationship, parentship, whatever you want to call this shipness of the world, with lenses and with people looking at your relationship. And then if you see enough feedback,
Hmm.
take a step back. Don't post it. Remove it.
Yeah, and we also are all about reflection and
Yeah.
realizing that you could do some of these behaviors and not be an abusive person, which we don't even
Right.
believe in like that terminology. But, I think it's okay to notice that you've had a problematic behavior or you've done something quote unquote wrong and then reflect on that and make different choices moving forward. And I think there's incredible power in that. Um,
Absolutely.
which maybe we don't give people the option to change sometimes, and I think it's
Right.
important.
Well,
Um,
there's where cancel culture starts. Yeah, for sure.
exactly. And you don't give people an ability to reform or to change, and
Hmm.
sometimes it drives them deeper into where they are and they get,
Yeah.
no, well, I won't change now because everybody's coming for me. So it's a very interesting topic. Um, so is there anything else about this topic that I haven't covered that you would like to add?
Um, no, I think that our lens and our awareness is something that, you know, it's a blessing. It's really, the social media has become the windows to a lot of things that we probably didn't want to talk about because we're not supposed to do that, especially culturally for me.
Mm,
Relationships and partnerships are not supposed to be so advertised, so out there. And so
interesting.
seeing Latinos on TikTok having beautiful, loving, funny relationships is amazing to me. Seeing great mother-son relationships, father-daughter relationships, even relationships that are healing from their generational trauma is beautiful. So I think social media is getting a really bad rap because of all of these negative things, but we also have to take in consideration that it is creating a significant societal change. And
Mhm.
so again, both things can exist in the same universe. We just need to see how we see it.
Yeah. And I think that duality is really important. You can't just have one mindset or the other,
Right.
because if you vilify something entirely, people aren't going to listen. But I agree,
Absolutely.
there's positives and negatives to everything. And it's really how you use it and having the present and conscious state of mind to choose how to engage in it in a healthy way. Fiorella, you are an absolutely wonderful guest. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I am always so blown away by the wisdom and insight of our staff members. Personally, this episode gave me a lot to think about regarding social media. We challenge you to do the same when you're engaging with content online. Think about the impact it's having on the other person. Are they laughing with their partner, or is everyone just laughing at them? Thank you for listening to this episode of Unsilenced, Real Conversations About Abuse. This podcast is produced by JBWS, a domestic violence agency serving Morris County, New Jersey. Please let us know what topics you would like covered on this podcast by sending an email to podcast@jbws.org. Please note that this email address is only intended for content relating to the podcast. It is not meant to offer immediate assistance or access to services. If you live or work in Morris County and think you might be in an unhealthy relationship, JBWS is here to help. Please visit our website at jbws.org to learn more about our services or call our 24-hour helpline to speak to members of our staff at 1-877-782-2873. If you recognize controlling or abusive behaviors in yourself, JBWS can also help change those behaviors. Through our Jersey Center for Nonviolence, JBWS offers programs for men, women, and adolescent males who have used abusive or controlling behaviors in their relationships. Please visit jbws.org/JCNV or call 973-539-7801 to learn more. If you don't live in Morris County, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Domestic violence grows in silence, so thank you so much for listening and helping us break through that silence through these types of conversations. Please follow us on social media and continue to share our content to get as many people talking about domestic abuse as possible.